Hey guys, I hope you can hear me all right. Welcome to the comment below and let me know Friday social issues chat. It's good to have you guys with us. And in case any of you wonder, no, Francois has not woken up with foreign accent syndrome, but he has a very sore throat. So it's me, Angels, guest hosting for the topic today. And the topic today is voting age. Now, this is a topic which I found people are fairly split on, but it's something that I've actually been involved in campaigning for in order to actually lower the age in the UK. In the UK, it's currently 18. And whilst I used to think that that was an acceptable age, I've actually done a bit of a U-turn on my thoughts on this. And I do think that in the wake of sort of young people, when it comes to being involved in politics or lack of, people are very sort of apathetic towards it and things like that. I do believe that maybe lowering the age and getting the discussion out there at a lower age might actually encourage more sort of younger people to get involved. So what I'll do is I'll just read you out a couple of a few of my thoughts on the age of voting in various countries, and then I will go over to you and you can sort of let me know your opinions as a general thing. So basically, the Representation of the People Act in 1969 lowered the voting age in Britain from 21 to 18, with effect from 1970. And then basically it's remained sort of the same until it was quite pivotal during the Scottish Independence Referendum Act, because that was in 2013, which actually allowed 16-year-olds to vote for the first time. But it was only in Scotland and only for that referendum. The UK as a whole still has the age at 18. I know that the USA, it's also 18 years old. That was due to the 26th Amendment. Now, there are countries, obviously, that have lowered the voting age after fairly sort of in-depth debate. Austria, Brazil and Malta are three which have actually lowered it to 16. And there is very much an active debate in Europe, in the European countries, about this. So what I'm going to do is head over to the room, if I can find it. And take a few of your comments. So, so President A says, I personally think the voting age should be lowered to at least 16. If you can drive at that age, you should be able to vote. Yeah, now I would agree with that. I think that you can do various other things at 16. I mean, gosh, you can even get married at 16, right? I know that you can get married at 16 with parental consent in the UK. I'm not sure if it's the same in the US. I think it is. I think you can get married at 16 and things like that. Why should you not kind of have a say? I think it's quite important too to take on board the fact that, you know, really, like politics as a whole, when people voting, it actually is going to directly affect their future. And obviously young people are the ones that are going to be affected the most. For fear of sounding ageist, you know, you have some people who are much, much older, who may perhaps be affected for the next decade, but are unlikely essentially to be around for much longer. So when it comes to monumentous kind of decisions and that kind of thing, I think that younger people should get a say. Ellen's here. Hi, Ellen. Good to see you. Francois, you said you agree it should be lowered to 16. Yeah, you see, again, I've actually done a U-turn on this. I used to think that 18 was an acceptable age because I didn't think that perhaps many people would have the maturity, I guess, to make informed decisions and things like that. But the reason why I've changed my stance is that A, I think that politics and sort of social issues and things like that should start to be discussed in schools from a much younger age. And B, as I said, I think that getting younger people involved, you know, limits voter apathy and that kind of thing, because at the moment we've got a real problem with younger people just having no interest in their own futures whatsoever, which essentially is politics and social issues. Francois, you also said, and if it were lowered here in Australia, it would be very different, because generally speaking, millennials think differently to older people. They do, exactly. Yes, it's compulsory to vote in Australia. Yeah, I actually think compulsory voting's a pretty good idea as well. But having said that, you would also need a none of the above box, because I respect people's right to be able to vote, but I equally respect people's right not to have to vote for any one particular party. So providing it's a none of the above, you know, it has a none of the above box on the ballot paper, I'm all up for that. Ellen says, I'm not sure about lowering the age of voting. When I think of 16-year-olds, they don't care about politics. I got politics at school, was so bored and just didn't care. Yeah, but that's the whole reason. It's sort of like, I view it because of that. I view it in the opposite way, if that makes sense. Skylar's here. Hey, Skylar. Just wanted to say to Ellen, yeah. So I think it should be lowered for that very reason. I think that politics should be taught earlier, and then I think that, you know, it should start to, or hopefully start to engage more younger people, so they feel at least a part of the system and feel that they have some kind of a voice, in which case by the age of 16 they're more likely to be interested. There is an argument, you know, from that kind of thing, from that kind of stance. So that's what I think I'd go with at this stage, because I think that the sort of apathy really of of many voters actually, but especially younger people, is really getting to the point where it can be quite dangerous, because if you've got such a low turnout, it's not really representative of the views of many people. So this very small amount of people that end up turning out may have, for example, archaic views on, I don't know, equal marriage or that kind of thing. We do also know, like, if you take, let's take sort of certain demographics, we know that older people over 60, for example, are more likely to not be on board with equal marriage and various sort of social things that the vast majority of younger people just take as like should be blanket normality. And the danger, of course, of them not turning out and not voting is that their voice is not going to be heard. So, I mean, I know in Australia, you still don't have equal marriage, you guys. So, and I do find that a little bit stuck in the past. And I mean, maybe it is because of that. You know what I mean? Thank God you've got like the postal vote coming up. I know it's not enforceable necessarily, but it's still worthwhile actually getting your voice heard. So yeah, kids, if you're in Australia, vote yes to equal marriage. Here, yes. So Skylar says, here I believe it's 18. I don't know many 18-year-olds that vote. I know in college I knew people who voted. Well, yes, well, I know it's 18 in the US, like as a general rule. I think that many people probably aren't interested before then. As I said, it's not really taught to people, so people don't know, often younger people at least, don't particularly know what they're voting for. They are relatively disinterested because they don't know the ins and outs of it, and they just see it as something that, oh, well, it doesn't make a difference anyway. But the fact is, it can make a difference. And policies of one party are different to policies of another. So Francois, you just said exactly, it's not representative of everyone. The younger generation seem to have an I don't mind what you do view, whereas the older crowd seem to be much more conservative. That's true. There's a famous quote, isn't it, that says if you're not conservative by the time you're whatever, then I can't remember exactly how it goes. It's someone, if anyone knows the quote, they can correct me, but it's like if you're not a socialist when you're 20 or something. But yeah, it is traditionally true. It's obviously not true for everyone. I don't like to tar everyone with the same brush, but it is traditionally true that older people, you know, tend to be more conservative, and younger people tend to be much more liberal with their views. So like I said, if only the older crowd turn out, then really the politics of a country, the government of a country, etc., is not necessarily representative of, you know, the well, just of everybody as a whole. Ellen says, I'm not sure about that. I think it's not a good decision to have 13, 14-year-olds to learn about politics. I would like them not have to worry about important decisions. In my high school, from my second class, 14 years old, we got education about politics and then we all voted. Not that it counted, but they could see what teenagers would vote. Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. I remember at my college, college? Yeah, I think it was like sixth form college, first year, so we would have been 16. We had like a dummy kind of ballot, if you see what I mean, and just to gauge like how people would vote after they taught us the basics. I was chatting to a friend of mine the other day. He was like, he said, no, he agrees that politics should be taught at a younger age, but not the extremes of politics. So that they should teach about sort of politics of the moderate left, of the centre, and the sort of centre right, but not teach about real kind of political extremes, because that's quite a lot for kids to get their head around. Yeah, yes. Oh, thank you. Francois said, if a man is not a socialist by the time he's 20, he has no heart. If he's not a conservative by the time he's 40, he has no brain. I actually believe Winston Churchill stole that off someone, if I remember rightly. I did read that somewhere. I don't know how true that is. Disclaimer right there. Ellen, but as I said, I didn't take it seriously because you were 14, so you just vote for something with a funny name. Yeah, well, we've got the Monster Raving Loony Party here, so, you know. I know that Australia has the Sex Party or whatever. That sounds great, doesn't it? But that is actually a serious party, and it has some really quite decent sort of pledges. But unfortunately, the name, I think, probably doesn't do it justice. Skylar says, I think here in the States, in school, politics should be touched on more. It really isn't, like the basic fundamentals and so on. When people at 18 decide to vote, either they're self-studying type or they didn't know anything about who was in the ballot. Yeah, exactly. That's why I do actually think that as a general rule, and I mean this in all countries, I do think that, you know, people should learn the basics of politics. Obviously, the age at which people think it's appropriate to start teaching that varies according to opinion. Ellen doesn't think it should be taught as young as I do. Like, I think politics should be basically sort of it should be like a must in schools from, I'd say, 12, 13. Not really hardcore, but just to give people an idea of sort of the political spectrum and how certain policy and that kind of thing can affect their lives, so that they are already maybe receptive to it when they start learning it properly later on. Francois, the minimum age is 16 in Argentina, Austria, Brazil, Cuba, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and the Isle of Man. Yes, I included Brazil and Austria actually, and I think there was one that you missed out there. Let me have a quick look. Yeah, Malta also has a voting age of 16. We have the Piratenpartij. Yeah, I know the Pirate Party, Ellen. That is sort of more about not sort of Big Brother is watching you on the internet and various things, isn't it? They're very much into sort of civil rights and internet freedom and that kind of thing, if I remember correctly. Francois says, yeah, the Australian Sex Party is an amazing future-focused, evidence-based human rights and civil liberties. Yes, I had a look on the you know, on the website after you told me about it, and I totally agree. I just think it's a real shame it's called that, because I think that whether we like it or not, people are judgmental. And I think that a name like that, people would be like, what the hell? Like, it sounds like some party that's like basically saying, hey, why don't we just all have orgies every day and like not care about any other social issues? And whilst that might sound fun for some people, I just think maybe if it had a more serious name, yeah, exactly. If it had like more of a serious name, I think that they'd be able to get their points across much better without that kind of getting in the way. Ellen says, yes, it is. She's referring to the Piratenpartij, which is like the pirate party. But she only found out when she was older that it was about freedom on the internet and that kind of thing. Yeah, I had a friend who actually voted for that party as well. So I did quite a lot of reading up before the Dutch elections, because I was terrified that Wilders would actually do really, really well. Luckily, he didn't. Yes, they should change the name because people think they're trying to legalise prostitution. Yes, so you're referring obviously to the Australian Sex Party. Exactly. And you don't really want people to kind of judge that on that one thing when they are putting so many other, in my mind, very good sort of pledges and things forward. So is voting compulsory in Holland? No, well, I don't think it is. Ellen, you can put me right on that. I haven't actually. Everyone I knew voted, so it may be. I'm not sure, but not sure whether it's actually compulsory. I know it is in Belgium, but I'm not sure when it comes to Holland. Actually, I guess everyone I knew voted, so I didn't really think about it. Ellen says we have something like that too. We have Partij voor de Dieren. Yeah, the Party of Animals. Yes. I took a look at that party as well. That was one of the 28 parties on the ballot paper. 28 parties in Holland they had on the ballot paper, which in some ways is really good because you have a much broader choice. It's not compulsory in Holland. Yeah, I didn't think it was. I know it is in Belgium though, but now I think it's really great that people voting in Holland have such a broad choice. There's obviously arguments to be made, well, then it spreads the vote too much and it splits the vote and all this. But having said that, I don't believe that sort of two-party politics is representative of the majority of people. I was having a chat with Francois the other day where, you know, because Australian politics is very much like that too, as a general thing. There's sort of like the two-party thing, and it is here as well. It's like Conservatives or Labour, really. I don't feel that that's really representative of the majority of people. I feel like we're all a bit of a mix of everything. I would rather see a much more varied landscape when it comes to politics, as opposed to being forced to vote to basically pick the lesser of two evils if you don't agree with everything that one of the parties says. Francois says an Australian news site is saying giving 16-year-olds the vote would be an insult to democracy. Well, if you want to bang on about democracy, it would technically be more democratic. So I don't really understand where they got that from. I was having an interesting chat yesterday with a friend, and I thought that that in certain scenarios, if we take the referendum vote to remain or leave the European Union in the UK as an example on this, because remember the other referendum, which was the Scottish referendum, they did allow 16-year-olds to vote. I was wondering whether it would actually have altered the result overall, because a vast majority of younger people wanted to remain in the European Union. So having people between the ages of 16 and 18 also being able to vote, if they were mobilised, would that have affected the overall result? I mean, we've got no way of knowing, but I do think it can alter outcomes, you know, as an overall thing. As to how much, we can't really know, but yeah, it would definitely make a difference, I think. Ellen says there are a lot of parties, but they do have lots in common and they work a lot together. So I think it's a good idea to have a lot of parties. Yes, in Holland, I totally agree, Ellen. I want this setup personally. My view is that we should have more of a sort of a cooperative view in the UK politics, because I want some form of proportional representation and then some form of coalition government, because I feel it's much more democratic. And I think that it actually puts across more accurately the views of people and the views of voters. What do I think about Brexit? I am absolutely appalled by Brexit. I don't know what I hate more, Brexit or the PLL finale. But don't get me started on that, because I'll probably never stop ranting. But of course, that's my view, and there are other people out there with different views. That's fair enough. I was like a die-hard Remain voter. So, yeah, that's what I think about Brexit. I think it's one hot mess. Francois says, if the law were to change, the 600,000 young Australians who would become voters would turn out in droves, taking a stand against self-serving, short-term, big business pandering kind of politics. We've seen under the Liberal government. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I think that they probably would, but they would also have to be mobilised. It's one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to give younger people the vote, in order to mobilise them so they're not so apathetic, so they can actually make a difference. I also find it quite ironic that your Conservatives are called the Liberal Party, because it's a little bit misleading, because obviously our Liberal Democrats are sort of centrist to centre left. So it's quite strange to get your head around. But yeah, I do think that that could easily make a difference. Again, like I said, totally dependent on them actually turning out though. So it would need a lot of campaigning just to get people out there and to just to let them know really that they can make a difference. Skylar says, I'm in part of favour with leaving it at 18 because that's when you're legally considered an adult, and by then you would have somewhat of an idea of where your views lie. I think in high school, when you're 15 to 17, you should be getting more than the basic fundamental taught to you. Yeah, I do as well. I think it should be taught before that, actually. Like I said, I think it should be taught as far as the basics earlier. But I'd say if you're really going to go into depth on it, you probably would have to wait until a little bit older just so people can get their heads around it. Francois, I almost spat out my Coke when you said you don't know what you hate more, Brexit or the PLL finale. Well, now you know just how much I hate Brexit. That puts that into context. Skylar says, because not everyone makes the initiative to study politics on their own. Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted it to be mandatory, just so that people have at least a bit of a background on it. I feel like as well, if people don't know the basics from an impartial source, the moment that they start to learn about it, they often learn about it in certain biased media. So they'll get it from papers that already have a slant or a bias or like some sort of indoctrination thing where they're sort of drip feeding you what your political stance should be. So I think that learning it impartially in school or college or whatever would actually be helpful in people making an informed decision without being, sort of forced into thinking a certain way. Francois says, yeah, the irony, the Liberal Party, it should just be called the Conservatives. I know it's traditionally called the Conservatives in most other countries, or the people who don't give a damn party. It's all right, Skylar, don't worry. I sort of understood what you were getting at. It's fine. Yeah, I agree. They should just be called the Conservatives. Did you vote in the Netherlands? And if so, what did you vote? I did not vote in the Netherlands because I can't, because my nationality is British. But if I had voted, I would have voted either Green Left or D66, probably. Francois says, yes, that's my one and only concern with allowing younger people to vote is would they have an impartial view being forced into it by parents or something? Well, we could always sort of argue that kids are going to take their parents' views, and that's the case. So I think that kids are going to pick up their parents' views whether we like it or not. I don't think that's right, and I would like them to obviously have an impartial view if they were taught it in a school or college on an impartial basis. But I think that there's an element of kind of influence that they're going to end up having either way. But I still think that, the best way of combating that is to learn it from an institution which is as impartial as you can possibly get. Ellen, I voted Green Left. Nice. Oh yeah, I probably would have gone Green Left. Either, like I said, that or D66, but most likely Green Left. Skylar says, yeah, the basics are taught in junior high and mentioned again in high school. So junior high and high school, the ages are like what? Sort of like 14 and then 16-ish. But if you never get more than that, I think the voting age should match the age of when you're considered an adult. Yeah, I mean, yes, but then voting again is all about the future, like or one's future. So that you could also say, well, because they're younger people, this has a lot to do with their future. So, do they have the right to have a voice? Again, it's still being debated in Europe. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of the European countries lowered the voting age, to be honest. I did, Francois says, I did when I turned 18. Mum was Labour, so I voted Labour without thinking. Exactly. But having said that, in my view, of course, this is only my view, disclaimer right now, out of your guys, if I'm just taking the two major parties, I think Labour would probably be the better option anyway. It seems to me that the views of the Liberal Party, some of them are very archaic and don't really have a place in 2017. Ellen says, I'm all about the environment, like those hurricanes just don't come out of nowhere. Exactly. We need to do something about it because it's already getting out of hand. So I proposed for the social issues chat, I actually did propose the topic of climate change and the environment, because we can talk about all sorts of problems that we have in the world right now, terrorism and maybe some people being on the breach of, some countries being on the brink of war and all this. But what is essentially going to kill us all? Climate change. Like, that is probably the #1 thing facing us as far as looking long term, and it's going to affect all of us. So it's something that we need to start addressing now. Some countries are obviously much more ahead. The Netherlands is really good like that, Ellen, actually, I have to say. I think that it's a bit of a leader when it comes to sort of green energy and that kind of thing, wind energy and things like that. I mean, we could all do more, but you're right. It absolutely is something that needs to be addressed way more than it is at the moment. Francois, we're lucky we don't get hurricanes here. Well, yeah, I mean, here we had really bad flooding and things like that, but some of the hurricanes that you actually end up seeing, you know, the devastation that they leave behind is just unthinkable. You sort of think these poor people, you know, homes torn up and people just, it's awful, awful. President A, when I first voted, I had my choices who I wanted, but did get a second opinion from parents. Okay, all right. Where is it that you live again, President A? Is it Australia? Skylar says, I think my bigger problem with voting here in the States, if you don't declare yourself either Republican or Democrat, you cannot vote in the primaries election. Yeah, exactly. Whilst it's very different, the setup in the States, it's still very much the two-party thing. It has to be like one or the other. Yeah, President A is Australia. Yeah, cheers. Yeah, I think it's the same sort of thing, though. You can't vote in the primaries, obviously, unless you declare yourself to one of the two major parties. And the problem is the system in America as well means that a third party is really unlikely to succeed, because in order to actually get the funding that they need and things, and then obviously to get themselves on the ballot in every state, you need to have, what is it, something like at least 5% of the vote, which is doesn't sound like a lot, but it's massive for a party that doesn't have funding and that kind of thing. So I think it would be a lot more democratic if Americans had more to choose from, because let's face it, they either had the Donald or Hillary Clinton. Probably one of the worst two choices I've ever heard in my life. Skylar, junior high is 11 to 13, possibly 14 to 17. Okay, well, that's actually a decent age, I think, probably, to start at least learning the basics. I'd agree with that. I think that that's actually a decent age. Like I said, they shouldn't really go to the extremes and start really sort of pressing the major, like, super heavy issues. But I think, yeah, to learn the basics, that's pretty good age. Ellen says, when I voted a couple of months ago, we got a lot of education at school. College. So college for you, are you talking about like 16 to 18, like sort of sixth form in the UK? Then I did some education myself and actually convinced my mum to vote for Green Left too, because she voted PVDA for years. When I told her about Green Left, she agreed with me. Yeah, the PVDA in Holland, by the way, for those who don't know, is basically the equivalent of the Labour Party, either in the UK or in Australia or wherever else you are, probably the left of the Democrats in America. Now, they actually got destroyed in the most recent election. They got really, I think they only got something like, 18 to 22, that's college, okay. They only got, Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, but they got a really small amount of seats, the PVDA, didn't they? Because a lot of their votes either went to D66 or the Green Left. So, yeah, it's, yeah, D66 is a Liberal Party, but it's much more socially liberal, isn't it? So, than say a typical Conservative Party. Francois says, it's so interesting and weird hearing other countries talking about what they need to do in order to vote. We're here in Australia, if you don't vote, you get in so much trouble and fined. Yeah, I don't think you should really get fined. I think that's probably taking it a bit far. But having said that, compulsory voting, I guess, does, at least the turnout's better, I suppose. D66, yes, it's like Ellen says, it's a Liberal Party, but Francois, just to explain it a bit more, you know, I said that I voted for the Liberal Democrats, which I would call maybe like a centrist party, pro-business, but very socially liberal. Like, they're very, you know, equal marriage, equal rights, all that kind of thing. Legalize weed, same kind of thing. Skylar says you don't even need to register to vote. Oh, you don't? See, you actually have to properly put yourself on the register here. So plenty of people in this country have, you know, there's a potential that they could just fall off the voting register and then not put, you know, not get themselves back on, which is a real shame, because I think then, you know, they miss out on so many votes that could sway, or could in theory sway something one way or another. Yeah, Ellen says the PvdA, which is the Dutch Labour Party, got 7. That's nothing compared. They used to dominate, didn't they? So Francois, oh yeah, Skylar, it's a huge deal here. It does go too far getting fined, but that's just the way it is. Even if you're in hospital during the voting term, it's no excuse. Are you serious? That is ridiculous. I mean, there should be some exceptions, surely. Ellen says that the Labour Party, so the PvdA, got 23 4 years ago, and it shrunk to 7. Yeah, they did get seriously crushed, but I don't think that the left-wing vote actually got smaller. I think that the votes just migrated elsewhere. The Green Left came out of nowhere and did really well. I think they quadrupled their seats under Jette Klaver. So Skylar says you have to register to vote. That comment was adding to my previous one. You don't have to register to vote if you don't want to. Oh, okay. But like you said, you can't vote in primaries unless you're registered with one of the 2 major parties, right? So you can still vote overall, you just can't vote in the primaries. So yeah, I'd say, so what do people think? Like Skylar, you said you're with sort of 18. Ellen, what did you say? Are you with the kind of 16-year-olds vote, providing they are sort of taught politics in schools a couple of years previously? I used to previously be with Skylar. I used to sort of say, well, you know, not really sure that 16-year-olds, you know, mature enough, blah, blah, blah. But I actually think that it's their future as well. And I do think, like I said, it would have an effect on the overall outcome. Our turnout here, like the highest turnout in the UK at least, but also I think this is a trend in other countries, is that older people are much more likely to turn out. So that obviously skews the outcome very much in the older demographics' favour. So I just think that maybe in order to balance it, I think it won't, you know, it's not going to work wonders overnight, but I do think that allowing younger people to have a say about their future is probably the way forward, to be honest. Francois says, my reasoning for wanting 16-year-olds to be able to vote is because I think everything would change. It would be much more realistic vote showing what the entire country wants as opposed to one part of it. Yeah, exactly. That's my reason. That's the reason why I changed my mind overall. It's the reason why I did a U-turn on it, actually. Yeah, kind of. Okay. The Sex Party would probably get in. Well, Francois, if the Sex Party got in, I mean, I actually, despite their ridiculous name, I actually, when I went onto the website, I took a look at a lot of the policy and you know, what they were sort of putting forward and that kind of thing, and I just think it makes a hell of a lot of sense. So you know, like I said, if they get a serious name, they could be the ones to watch. You never know. Fingers crossed. Ellen says a bit education and getting more over the years, but voting at 18. Okay, so you're pro sort of people learning about it and that kind of thing, but then getting the actual vote at 18. Francois, yeah, Fiona Patten, the Sex Party leader, is awesome. She seems like a really quite an inspiring woman. I have to admit, I was very pleasantly surprised. After sort of thinking that she wants to like legalize orgies, I went when I went onto the website and I actually had a read up about her and things. I was really very pleasantly surprised by her. She does seem like a really, really good woman. So yeah, for anyone that wants to read up on her, her name's Fiona Patten. She's leader of the Australian Sex Party, and she's also a campaigner, and she's done sort of years of campaigning for sex workers' rights, but also just you know, wider things like wider equal rights and things like that, like gay rights, etc. Yeah, so definitely have a read. Ellen says, well, kind of, because we now have a coalition of the VVD, which is mostly for businessmen. I'm not a fan of them. No, I'm not either. the Christian Democrats, the CDA is the Christian Democrats. This is in Holland, by the way, for those of you, which is traditional and religious. The D66 and the PVDA, no, sorry, no, and the Green Left, right? Or the PVDA is in coalition, is it? Because the Green Left were in talks, but I was a bit like, how are they gonna agree with a VVD? They've got fundamental differences. Yeah, Francois, oh my God, we have a Communist Party of Australia. Yeah, of course. Like, I'm pretty sure they stepped out of the coalition. Okay, I hadn't read up on that. Yes, I'm pretty sure that despite them being really small and like a tiny force, that almost, I would imagine at least, that pretty much all parties do, all countries do actually have the remnants of a communist party. So yeah, I don't know, look it up in your own country. You probably do though. I know that there's one here. Skylar says, I wouldn't mind 16 if they are taught at least more than the basics in high school. I'm always matching it to the legal age to simplify things. But I wouldn't mind 16 as long as they actually know what they're voting for. Yeah, indeed. That's exactly right. The only thing that I would ask is that people are sort of clued up. They can make an informed choice that's hopefully not, biased. Although it's impossible to gauge whether people are going to sort of pick stuff up from their parents and, their contemporaries, people they hang around with, because they're bound to do that. It's just human nature. Ellen says that the Green Left stepped out of the Dutch coalition. Okay, I know they were in talks for a while. I thought it might end that way because I couldn't really conceivably see how the Green Left could agree with the VVD. For those out there, that's basically like the Green Party, like the left-wing, environmentally, sort of pro-environment Greens, and the VVD is more like, it's not as right-wing as a lot of other conservative parties in other countries, but the VVD is basically pro-business, sort of centre-right, like centre-right sort of party. So they obviously have fundamental differences. So to be in a coalition together is always going to be hard work and a hell of a lot of compromises. Francois says, and yet no party of Satan. Damn. Wow, you really wanted to vote for the party of Satan? We probably have party of Satan. I mean, there's some really screwed up people here. Well, there's screwed up people everywhere, to be fair, but whatever. I'll be Googling that straight after the chat. Francois said, it's funny because at 16 and 17, we're discussing as kids how we'd change the world. Having the vote gives us some of that power, turning a dream into a partial reality. Yeah, I mean, it obviously depends on your system as well. Some systems are easier to be part of and to actually make a difference in than others. Like we've got a system called first past the post, which means that it goes by seats, not votes. So if in your, say, constituency, as they call it, one party gets more votes than the others, that constituency is classed as a Conservative constituency or like a Labour constituency. So the problem I have is that because the constituency that I vote in is basically Conservative the whole time, nothing that I vote for is going to make a difference. So it really doesn't matter. But I still sort of make the effort to do it anyway, because at the very least it dents the majority and sends a message, right? It's very important that people vote for that reason. Shouldn't let apathy take over. Skylar says, here 16-year-olds can't even have consensual sex in all 50 states. Really? I didn't know that. I thought it was, the age of consent was at least 16, because they aren't considered old enough to decide and make wise decisions. So I don't think the age limit is going to change anytime soon, just to how 16-year-olds are perceived. Yeah, but I thought, Skylar, I wasn't sure about this, but I thought that 16-year-olds can get married in the States. I guess it's a state, like state by state, it's going to be different, but yeah, I thought that 16-year-olds could actually, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that they could. Perhaps it's just, like I said, depending on state again. Francois says, yeah, I hear that my constituency voted Liberal. Oh, yeah, okay. Is it like a pretty safe Liberal seat there? It's the same kind of thing, right? So you have like seats. It's not like PR or not like proportional. where like everyone's vote to an extent counts. Seats and safe seats, exactly. Safe seats are very depressing. A friend of mine who lives in Brighton, she always says, well, look, if you live in a safe seat, if you are in a country which has a system like that, where it goes by seats, so many votes, people's votes are wasted and they feel like they don't have a voice, find out where your nearest marginal constituency is and then just go and help campaign there for whatever party you want. I guess it's a much more proactive way of doing things, so I think maybe that's that could be a way to go, but I just don't think it's very democratic. One of the reasons why I voted the way that I did in the UK general election, which was for the Liberal Democrats, is because they wanted to put forward voting reform to make it a form of proportional representation, which would then make it, obviously, in my view, much more democratic and also much more representative of everybody who votes, not just one particular party. Skylar says, yeah, here in New York, the consensual age to having sex is 16. So to have sex is 17. 16 is illegal. Oh, okay. It's on a state by state basis. Oh, right. Okay. So it's 17 in New York. I just like consistency, and that's what I'm for. Yeah. Am I wrong then in saying that certain states you could get married at 16? I'm not sure whether I just kind of randomly made that up, because I think you can get married here at 16 with your parents' consent or something weird. Who the hell would want to get married at 16 anyway? Francois says, exactly. And because of that, there is absolutely nothing for gay people here at all, which is something I'm not used to. No clubs, no youth groups or anything. Yeah, that sucks. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether it's a Liberal constituency or not. Like, there should obviously be a place where gay people can go. There should be a place where everyone should be able to go, but there should most definitely be, you know, places for gay people to actually turn up, meet like-minded people. And I mean, let's face it, you know, you have younger people still. This is still very much a real thing, that people struggle and things when they come out, and to actually meet individuals that you can have a good old conversation about that have gone through or are going through the same thing is helpful. So to have places where you can meet like-minded individuals is so important. You want to write to your guy about that, or just turn up at the public meetings and roast him like I like doing. Ellen, I'm just listening because I'm cooking, but I'm still here. That's cool, Ellen. I'll just carry on rambling for a little bit. I'll wrap this up in about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'm sure there will be a hangout. I'm not sure who can be. I've got to rush off and do more work, unfortunately, but I'll probably join after. Skylar says, I think you can with parents' consent. So you can get married with parents' consent. But I haven't seen or heard of a 16-year-old getting married recently. No, me neither. But then, like I said, it would depend. Like, I suppose in a lot more of the rural states where people sort of tend to, I don't know, get married and like maybe have kids a lot earlier. It's probably more common, like in those types of places, I'd imagine, as opposed to the cities. But yeah, I think as a general rule, they can. Let's have a Chefs for Power party. Chefs for Power meaning cooking, because Ellen's cooking. Francois says, exactly. I was shocked when I lived in a rural area a while ago. There were so many options, and yet, which is suburban, and yet in the suburban area, there's nothing, you're saying? Or what? Oh, right. Okay. No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. So in the suburban area, there was nothing. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think that there should be options no matter where you are. I understand that in more cut off parts, there's obviously going to be less choice than the big cities that are overwhelmingly more, well, they're first of all, they're much more built up, but also a lot more liberal, much more sort of open-minded, and have a much more active, whether it's a gay scene or just generally really club scene, bar scene, etc. So I understand there's going to be less choice, but I do think that there should be that choice, nevertheless, if you see what I mean. Yeah, I think that's really important. You need to get on your MP's case and just say, look, give me a gay club, please. Oh, and by the way, while you're at it, legalise marijuana. No, I think overall, at the moment, actually, in Europe, for example, there is a big debate on lowering the age. That's another thing I wanted to mention. Lowering the voting age to 16. Now, I would not be surprised if that happened in the Netherlands or in Germany, perhaps even in France. Like, I think that's something that they will probably explore in the future. And actually, in a few of those countries, there is such a big divide between what people tend to, obviously not everyone, but what people tend to vote for when they're, say, 18 kind of thing. And if it was 16, between 16 and like 25, let's say, and then older people, I think that it would have a very, very big impact on the political landscape. So that would be quite interesting to see if they do start taking it on board. Francois says, it's so amazing, though, to see what's happening in politics, like in Canada. And then you look here. Yes, yeah. So on the one hand, you've got Canada that's very, very liberal. You've got a prime minister that is a self-proclaimed feminist, that is, you know, really sort of socially liberal, cutting edge, kind of, you know, and I mean, it helps that he's absolutely gorgeous looking. But, you know, he just seems to be way more plugged into this year. I think his cabinet was half female, and somebody, I think somebody said to him, why do you have half women in your cabinet? And he basically shrugged and said, because it's 2000, I think it was 2016 then or something. He's like, because it's 2016. And that's all he said. And I thought, yep, okay, I'm on board with this. But no, he appears to sort of just be plugged in with the times. And then on the other hand, you have, you know, in Australia, I feel like that really the Liberal Party, even though they call themselves that, are very much behind with the times on certain issues, and certainly on social issues that should, in my view, just be respected and blanket from now on, really. I mean, but then, you know, on the other hand, you've got Justin Trudeau in Canada, but then you've got Donald Trump in America. So, I mean, talk about chalk and cheese, you know what I mean? I guess that's just the nature of politics, though, isn't it? It's all swings and roundabouts. It just sort of goes from one thing to the next. President A says, I just found a new social issues topic. How far can a policeman / cop go while questioning and arresting someone? How far is too far? Well, that's a difficult thing to answer, because it would depend on, I guess, if they were resisting arrest, what the crime was, whether you believe they're armed. Yeah, you're right. That's quite a good debate. Francois, I'll stick that in the Starbucks then. Francois, and yet in Australia, Pauline Hanson goes into Parliament in a burqa. Yeah, that is very disrespectful. That woman is just awful. I mean, aside from the fact that she also actually named her party after herself, which is arrogant enough, she is quite happy to pull these ridiculous things out of the bag, which can be perceived as very offensive. And I'm not on board with Pauline Hanson whatsoever. I really, really, really dislike her. For anyone that doesn't know who she is basically a right-wing, very nationalist. I would imagine she's very anti-Islam, anti-immigration, you know, basically anti-everything. Awful, sort of a bit sociopathic in my view, Australian politician. And so she's viewed as being very sort of controversial and that sort of thing, but I don't think she's controversial. I just think she's awful. I think she's just awful. I don't think that there's nothing controversial about it. She really just shouldn't even be there. I'm quite surprised she gets any votes, to be perfectly honest, but there we are. I think, sorry, what was the name of her party again? The Pauline Hanson One Nation Party or something? Australian One Nation Party or something? Remind me of her. Yeah, God. So she would basically be a much more extreme version of the UK's version of, say, UKIP, right? Or she would be like the PVV in Holland, for example, the Wilders anti-Islam, anti-immigration, anti-everything that's hate on everything party. So I think all countries have got one. You know, she would be the Front National in France, so the National Front in France, headed up by Le Pen, of course. and the German version is the Alternative für Deutschland, so Alternative für Deutschland, so the AfD. It's that, yeah, we've all got one, but you know, 9 times out of 10 they tend to be fringe parties. They don't get enough votes to, luckily, to make a huge amount of difference. But you must listen to people with opposing views at the same time, no matter how much they may turn your stomach. So right, yes, Francois, that's a good question. I was about to ask that. Anyone else have any questions or thoughts? Just post them, because we're going to be wrapping this up soon, and I'm pretty sure that somebody will host a hangout if people are around. President A says, a nurse protecting a patient who was seriously injured from a detective with no warrant. The nurse got arrested and assaulted by the detective. Really? I mean, how the hell is that fair? When was this? Was this in Australia, you mean, recently? Or yeah, that doesn't sound acceptable at all. Francois, wow, so informative. All these parties, you know, I'm intrigued. Well, yeah, but then of course I obviously travel quite a lot in Europe, so I've read up on things like that, and I do quite a bit of reading up and involvement in UK politics. It just sort of led on from there, I guess. Trust me, I've still got a lot to learn. President A, Pauline Hanson, the female Donald Trump. Now there's a nasty thought. Not really sure that I can handle that. Probably the worst thought I could ever have before bedtime or something. Professor says, I like that you're correctly pronouncing all their names of parties in different countries. Oh, you mean in the language, you mean? Yeah, but I have to. I'm really OCD about pronouncing my different languages properly. President A says, yes, just saw the video when you were gone from the chat. You mean the video? Oh, right, the video of that nursing. Oh, that's awful. You'll have to link that so we can see it. No, that's awful. I mean, all the nurse was trying to do was help. That's ridiculous. That's really when things go way too far. I know that as well. There's a big debate in the US, and Skylar can probably comment on this one, but there's a big debate on the US when it comes to policemen, arrests and violence and things, as to, you know, how far's too far. I know they have a problem sometimes with violence, shooting, beating up and various other things with certain individuals and certain policemen, which is definitely something that needs to be addressed, because an abuse of power, if that is indeed going on, and I'm not knowledgeable enough on the subject to comment yet, but if like an abuse of power to that level is going on that scale, it needs to be addressed and sorted out, because that should not be happening in this day and age. Yeah, in the languages. Okay, like, you know what, one day we'll do a stream and it will be like multilingual. So there's the link there. I'm just going to have a quick look. Gosh, that is absolutely unbelievable. So there's a link there for those of you that want to look at the story that President A just mentioned about the nurse and trying to actually do her job and then getting arrested, it appears. But God, that's awful. I'll have another read of that later. But does anyone else have any other thoughts? I think overall that quite a few of us are in agreement that we do believe that potentially 16-year-olds should have the right to vote, providing they actually know what they're voting for. Skylar still thinks 18, but she's up for people learning about sort of politics on a basic level when they're a bit younger, and sort of knowing what they're voting for when they finally do go to the ballot box at 18. Yeah, so I think we are pretty much in agreement with that. But if there's anything else and you want to mention anything else before I'm going to wrap it up, then feel free. Skylar, oh yeah, just going back to the violence amongst policemen and things like that. Yes, in some circumstances you can see it's an abuse of power. Some are like lack of training in officers. Some are made to look like the officer is in the wrong or racist. Yeah, you see, this is another thing as well. There's a debate going on as well in the States about how some officers are coming down way harder on certain races than others. I haven't looked into it massively, and I haven't seen the official statistics really like in depth. I need to before we have a debate on it. But you know, I certainly know that it's like an active debate, and really one that needs to be looked into again and like addressed. I do think that there is, you know, that certain officers do have an abuse of power, because they're all like, they feel like the big man wearing the badge and stuff. There's definitely, I mean, it's not the majority, of course. It will be a minority of individuals, but certainly that is bound to happen. And people need to be, they really need to come down like a ton of bricks on people like that, because that is just disgusting. And obviously, yeah, the lack of training thing, we need to make sure that they're properly trained, so that individuals are all treated equally and fairly. I mean, look at that nurse right there in the article that was just linked. Okay, and just a couple more before we wrap up. Francois says, I think also Australia shouldn't keep it mandatory to vote. Just wanted to add that. Yeah, you see, I'm actually totally split about that. I think it's a good idea, because in our current climate, we've got a lot of voter apathy, so people are less likely to turn out, and I don't like low turnout because it twists the results. But at the same time, people have the right not to vote, I think. So it's quite difficult to get the balance right on that. I wouldn't mind mandatory voting as long as they had a none of the above box, like I said. Francois, well, I just want to say on behalf of everyone here, and comment below and let me know as a whole, thank you, Angels, for filling in. You did it brilliantly. Great chat. I'll have you to come back and host again. Yeah, well, I was actually gonna, since I was hosting, I was actually all set to go on camera and give you a wave and say cheers and stuff. But unfortunately, something happened at the last minute, and I was running around, and I got to work, and it's all crazy. So did more of a podcast style one. But yeah, definitely next time I will. So thanks for that, and thanks for having me. Skylar, you get a mix of it, like the white guy who shot up a black church was given Burger King, and everyone said those officers were bad because of that, but the officers were trying to do everything by the book to not ruin the possibility of conviction. And Burger King happened to be close to the precinct, and they had to feed him something while he was there. Yeah, like, of course, it's gonna, like, things like that. People are up in arms about stuff like that, right? And you can sort of understand why. It does seem a bit ridiculous, right? Giving someone Burger King when they've just gone in and shot a load of individuals. At the same time, you have to take things on a case-by-case basis. You know what I mean? They probably didn't want to screw up getting a conviction, and they didn't also want things to be called into question in court that might possibly get the guy off somehow. So yeah, I agree. But again, that needs to go by a case-by-case basis. But that's a debate for another day for sure. All right, I'm going to wrap this up now then, guys. Francois just mentioning he's putting a status on Facebook. If anyone wants to host a Hangouts, leave a link. But he can't because of his throat. Well, I hope your throat is, gets better. I'm glad that my throat's taken the brunt of it today. But yeah, you can always drop in and type. I might type afterwards, but I'm really busy. Like, I've got like loads of work to do. I was about to swear then. Hi, Honey. Honey's here. Honey Hepburn's here. Yeah, you're late. I'm sorry. We're just about to wrap this up, but there will be a Hangout. So if you wanted to join that, I'm sure you can. That's cool. So anyway, I'm going to say thanks to everyone. I don't know whether quickly Francois wants to sort of say bye in his really scratchy voice, but I will say goodbye for now, and much love, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Angels. As you can tell, guys, I really haven't got much of a voice. But if you do want to go to the page on Facebook, I've given you the link. If someone wants to do a Hangouts, then we can do that on there. Thank you, Angels, for hosting, and I'll see you all soon. Bye, guys.
See you soon. Bye.